I'd like to do a little survey. Who here, over the past year, and I'm going to raise my hand first, but who here has at some point woken up and looked at the headlines and just said to themselves, the world does not make sense anymore? All right, keep your hands up. Let's just take a look around the room. All right, take that in. Thank you. You know, acknowledging that the world doesn't make sense to us is the first step to a breakthrough insight. Because the world always makes sense. The world always makes sense once we see it from the right perspective. I'm just curious, what do we see here? Anyone? Just shout it out. It's the Earth. It's California. It's also sunset somewhere. Maybe New York City. 500 years ago, a Polish astronomer, Nicholas Copernicus, he had a startling insight. He said to his Polish friends, you know, we think that the sun travels east to west across the sky each day to produce day and night. But that's just a mistake of our perspective. I think what's really happening here is that the sun is fixed, and it just appears to be traveling because the Earth is spinning on its own axis. 500 years, and that insight still hasn't fully penetrated into our intuitions. It hasn't even penetrated our language. Sunrise, sunset. That's what it looks like to us standing here, but the reality is Earth spin. So every day and night, we are being powerfully reminded that our perspective warps our sight, limits our ability to see what's really going on. So when the world stops making sense, that's when we need to stop and take off our glasses and grind for ourselves a new way of seeing.
You could say that we are in the best of times, but former President Obama, he mentioned that inequality will be one of the defining challenges of our time. And according to Oxfam, 8 billionaires from around the globe have as much money as the 3.6 billion who make up the poorest part of the world's population. When you look at with the historical glasses, what kind of impact will this have?
I mean, it's a great question, Lillian. And you know, one thing about a Renaissance moment is it's an age of discovery. It's also an age of paradoxes. And so when you look at the inequality statistics, for example, that Oxfam shows, they're right. You know, macroeconomics, when we look broadly, you know, over the last 25 years, the people who have gained economically are the 1% and the Asian middle class. And everyone else has basically muddled through. And on the margins, it gets really scary. I mean, the bottom 10% of income earners in the US were earning more money, higher pay in real terms back in 1990, when the US economy as a whole was only 60% the size it is today. Can you imagine that, going through 25, 30 years of economic growth and you yourself, your family actually suffering?
If we're going to have like this society where the distribution of wealth is, as you mentioned there, can we end in a situation where we're going to see an uproar if we don't think how to distribute in a better way?
Well, I think we're already seeing it. And, you know, since, if we look here in Europe, since the financial crisis, I think Angela Merkel is the only elected leader of a state that was in power then and is still in power today. So we have to recognize that to a very significant extent, there has already been a political and a social reaction to these distribution questions. Now, I mean, so I very much look at the present through a Renaissance lens. A lot has changed in 500 years too. And maybe the biggest change in large parts of the world is a technology called democracy. And this is a very powerful technology for channeling broad popular discord in peaceful means into institutional change. And so I think that it's probably a fallacy to say, well, 500 years ago, Europe blew up when the Protestant Catholic Church, and basically the whole continent, reshuffled into those two halves. We have more sophisticated technologies now, I think, and we're already starting to see, I think, the political changes start to take place.